This webinar is brought to you by CHRMP. CHRMP stands for Certified Human Resource Management Professional. We are talking about CHRMP certification, a globally recognized certification. CHRMP is a competency-based HR certification. We are talking about 5,600 test centers in 190 countries. Our certification partner is Pearson VUE, and we have more than 10,000 strong alumni base. Right. So these are some highlights. Certification being competency based is very, very important. I'm sure if you have been following openings lately, you would see that organizations are increasingly using learning and development or talent development instead of training and development. They are using talent acquisition instead of recruitment. There is a reason for that, and that is that HR practices are changing and they are becoming increasingly competency based. So that is something that we have to all understand. Now, just go to LinkedIn, type CHRMP, you would be able to see CHRMPians working in different organizations across levels, right from VP to Director HRs to HR executives to HR VPs. You would find HR professionals, CHRMPians everywhere, right? Now, today, my name is Animesh Roy. I head the training and certification vertical for CHRMP in Asia Pacific and AU regions. I would be the lead facilitator for you today. I come with about 17 years of work experience in human resource. I have consulted a number of organizations, number of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies in terms of setting up their HR processes, analytics department, conduct HR audit, etc. Right. One thing that I would like to promise as I start this webinar is that by end of this webinar, you would exactly know what it takes to have a successful career during this pandemic times. And in return, what I need from all of you, and this is a big promise because I'm sure that a lot of you listening, people who have just passed out, a lot of freshers who are listening to me, and this webinar is largely for people who are looking at making a career in HR and people who are just out of college and freshers. We are talking about, there is a lot of conversation about economy being hit and a lot of things that's not going right, and a lot of times we tend to give in and we keep saying that okay, we so sad and this is we have to see this right at a time when we are passing out or right at a time when I was looking for a job. But then it's important that we understand that careers can be planned and jobs can still be people can still get jobs, right? So people are getting jobs. So to say that we cannot have a successful career right now would be wrong. And I would just take you through this understanding that how you can go about getting started in a human resource, especially during these times. But in return, what I need from you is your complete attention. Next 1 hour. Every slide is filled with information, tips, techniques. You have to make sure that you understand this well as we move ahead. And towards the end, I also have a surprise for you. So just stick around and also just make sure that you are giving this 1 hour completely in terms of without any distractions, etc. Right? Now, when we talk about what is happening to businesses during pandemic, I think there are two myths that I would really like to burst when it comes to pandemic. One is that companies have frozen all HR hirings, right? So that is not true. In fact, companies have not frozen all HR hirings. A lot of companies have not frozen hirings at all. And probably I'll share some data with you also in this regard, right? But we have to understand that there are companies which are not doing good. There are industries which are not doing good. And there are a lot of industries which are doing good. They are, in fact, doing better than what it was doing before. And there are a lot of industries which are hit, but not as badly as you think they are hit, right? So a lot of organizations see it as an opportunity to quickly grow, scale, offer services which otherwise were not being taken. There is a lot of disruption, so there is an opportunity. For example, if you look at what's happening in hospitality or aviation, yes, it's sad. But if you look at what's happening in education, what's happening in IT, in fact, car sales have gone up. right? House and construction sales have gone up. So to say that companies have frozen all HR hirings would be wrong. In fact, HR hirings are also dependent on hiring of other functions within the organization. So if you are hiring other people and you need HRs to support them, so largely HR hirings have not been frozen, and this is something, one myth that I would like to burst for you. Second is that with pandemic, companies' focus has only been revenue growth. I would not say that that's untrue. Revenue growth has always been any organization's priority, but we have to understand what takes this revenue growth or what makes this revenue growth possible. So when we try getting into understanding what makes revenue growth possible, we have to understand that it's an organization and it's people and it's the systems and processes and the culture and the efficiency of the system which would drive revenue growth and profits, right? And HRs are to a great extent are responsible for setting up the base, the foundation on which excellent processes, systems, and cultures develop for an organization. So organizations now more than ever are more focused on being able to, in this new environment, being able to redefine the working styles and cultures. And there is a lot of need of HRs to drive this, and I would cover that as well. So apart from revenue growth, I would also say that organizations are really putting in effort in terms of setting up processes, systems, and culture right, which is very, very important, and which is largely being driven by HR professionals, right? So with this, first I would like to talk a bit about organization, and then I would like to talk about situation, and then I would like to talk about what it takes for you to start a HR career, right? So first thing, we have to understand that when we talk about any organization, there are different roles in an organization, there are different departments in an organization, and it's important that we are able to understand where HR fits in, right? So when we talk about different departments in an organization, you have sales department, and you have marketing department, and you have operations, and you have the business processes, and you have finance, and you have accounts, and you have HR, and you have admin, and you have facility management, and you have all these departments within an organization, isn't it, right? So what kind of function and what kind of alignment these organizations, these departments have with the organization? It's very, very important for us to understand, right? So when we talk about these departments, right, we have to see their alignment, and when we see this alignment, we understand that they either are a core function or a support function, right? Now, what does core function mean, and what does support function mean? So when we talk about core function, we are talking about functions which are directly in line with the nature of business of organization. So, for example, anything which in its job description, in its the way it goes about doing things, the role it plays in an organization is trying to promote, trying to sell, trying to do things what the organization stands for. It is in line with the nature of business of organization. We're talking about core function. For example, if we take a bank, and if we take a banker, or if we take the branch manager, or if we take a cashier, they are in line with the nature of business of organization of banking, and they are the core function. Banking is being run by the banking operation folks, which are the bankers and the cashiers and the bank manager and the support, the account opening person, and all that, right? So these are largely core function, right? When we talk about sales and marketing, what are you promoting? What are you selling? So you are promoting and you're selling what the organization stands for. So if you are selling savings account or education loan or your home loans or car loans or education loans, whatever you are going about selling, we are talking about them being a core function. advertising, let's say, uh, even right from maybe chocolates to laptops. They are largely what the organization stands for. So if Dell stands for a company which sells laptop, then their entire advertising, entire sales, whether it's corporate or individual or anything, is largely in line with the nature of business of organization. Which is laptop sales and services, right? So they are core functions, right? That's true for almost every organization on planet, whether it's hospitality, whether it's healthcare. We are talking about doctors being the core functions. We are talking about nurses being the core function in a hospital. In hospital, and when we talk about hospitality, it's the front staff being the core function. When we talk about aviation, the ground staff and the cabin crew being the core function. So largely anything which is in line with the nature of business of organization is a core function. And similarly, you have support functions. Support functions are functions which are not actually doing what the business stands for. For example, when we talk about finance and accounts in an IT company like Accenture or Infosys or Oracle, finance and accounts guys are not doing programming, nor they are selling these giant software deals or tying up with bigger organizations to serve their software needs. But they are important because they are taking care of taxation, they are taking care of budgets, they are taking care of allocations, they are taking care of compliances. So they're very, very important, right? But finance is a support function for an IT firm, and finance is a support function for an aviation firm, and finance hospitality, and finance is a support function for any business that we are talking about, and accounts also, right? The same way when we talk about facility management, when we talk about administration, these are not core functions, these are support functions. And so is human resource. Human resource also is a support function, right? In fact, it is one of the most diversified support functions because we are talking about you supporting the entire employee life cycle from a time a person gets into the organization to a time a person leaves the organization, which means right from time to recruitment and selection or entry level interviewing to exit interviews, whatever it is, whether it's performance management, whether it's training and development, whether it's employee engagement, whether it's compensation, benefit, payroll, whether it's personal management. We are largely talking about HRs driving this through, right? So HR is one of the most diversified support functions. So the best understanding that we can have about human resource is that it is not a core function, it is a support function, and a very, very diversified, very, very strong support function, right? And this definition is very different from what otherwise you would see, because what I'm trying to tell you is largely an organizational understanding of how they see different departments, which is very, very important, right? So when we talk about your different departments, its alignment is very important, and the role it plays is very important. And to connect this back to the situation that we are in is also very important, right? So if it's an IT firm, HR professionals are not doing programming, and they're not, in aviation, they're not flying the plane, not they are catering to the customer, but they are responsible for getting people into the system. They are responsible for skilling them and getting them part of the processes and training them and making sure they get salaries on time in terms of comp and ben, and they to keep them happy through employee engagement, to measure their performance in terms of promotions and transfers and whatever appraisals that they go about getting. And even when people are leaving, in terms of conducting exit interviews, etc. It's the entire diversified support function of human resource that we are talking about, right? Now, when we relate this support function back to the situation that we are in, right? It's very, very important that we connect that how then we can start a career, an HR career, a human resource career during pandemic, right? So let's first understand in pandemic, uh, where is HR needed? And before that, let's understand what is a pandemic, right? So basically, disease spread hierarchy is outbreak, epidemic, and pandemic, right? I'm sure a lot of you know, so I would not probably putting too much time in here. But an outbreak is highly localized, an epidemic is only to a region, and pandemic is something which, when it spreads beyond boundaries and it spreads to the globes in multiple countries, etc. So when we say corona and when we say COVID-19, when we say something that originated from Wuhan, we are largely talking about pandemic, right? We are talking about something which has impacted businesses and organizations and people world over, right? Whether it's east, whether it's west, whether it's north, whether it's south, it's impacted almost the entire globe, right? So when we are talking about connecting this to human resource, so when we talk about connecting to organization and human resource, I think human resources has a very, very critical role to play in pandemic, right? Because we have to understand that a lot of disruptions have happened. There is lockdowns and there is second round of lockdowns and third round of lockdowns. There are companies where the second hit of corona is happening, and then we are talking about lockdowns again being extended or reimposed. A lot of things are happening in the globe right now, right? But businesses have to run. There has to be business continuity, right? And human resource to a great extent when it talks about, because it's managing human resource, right? I understand that there can be a different department which is maintenance and administration and facility management, which can manage machines, right? Or manage infrastructure. But we are here talking about managing human resources, right? And when an organization faces issues, when an organization faces challenges, we are talking about these these challenges being managed by human resource department for the employees of the organization, which is very, very important for us to understand. So there are a lot of things changing, right? For example, when we talk about what's changing in organization, is that now they need, if we are talking about a multinational company, it needs a local strategy, a regional strategy, and a global strategy in human resource to deal with this, right? You cannot have same strategy, same policy, similar policy everywhere, because things are different, right? What's in fact in the same country, in the same state, things are different, right? What's happening in Manila is not happening in Bangalore, and what's happening in Mumbai is not happening in Dubai, and what's not happening in Dubai probably is happening in San Francisco, right? So we have to understand that the response has to be very, very vital. The response has to be very, very specific. There is it has to be threefold, which means you need local human resource strategy, you need regional human resource strategy, and you need global human resource strategy, right? In terms of dealing with pandemic. But this is largely on a planning front, right? But when we talk about it getting executed, for which HR executives and other people get in line and they go about doing things, we are talking about various areas of focus which was never there before. For example, it was more about time and attendance policy where people are coming to office. Now it's about remote working, right? Where there is there is a lot of work from home that people are working and they're not coming to offices. Google, Amazon, etc. have already gone about declaring work from home till June 2021 and time to extend it, right? And how efficiently people can work on remote and what are the policies around it, how exactly they need to work around is something that needs to be created. Infrastructure support needs to be created. All this while, for example, organization has a policy of organizational equipments being given to employees, right? And largely it is specific to how they go about using this equipment in office, etc. With the remote working, it has changed, right? Policies like BYOC, BYOD is coming in. Bring your own computer, earlier it was there, right? But now they are calling it bring BYOD, bring your own device, which means not only computer, you can come up with new policies. So what I'm trying to tell you is there is a lot more that is happening than what meets the eye, and HRs are playing a much more proactive role for this. Health and safety policy and procedures are changing. It's completely changing for organization. All this has to be created, right? We are talking about learning continuity, right? Earlier training was happening and it was in rooms and 20 people were sitting inside a room, and now suddenly there is a disruption, but the organization has to do capability building. So how does learning continuity works? That is very, very important. How do you manage and measure absenteeism, and how do you deal with it? Now that everybody is logged at home, you may have absenteeism taking a big hit, but then you would have planned finances specific to a particular way of doing things. Or when we talk about the kind of absenteeism, all that is something that becomes important. We are talking about travel policy and procedures, which are very important. How do you respond to changing scenarios? For example, back to work policy, that is also important. When somebody gets back to work and office is open and people have to come in, then how people are sitting and what is happening, all this is something that needs to come in. Cross communication strategy is something that needs to be taken care of. And then there are critical resources in the company, people who are critical resources to the company. For example, it can be CEO or CFO or CTO. Not only that, you can be even at any level, you can have people. For example, if it's a pharma company today, a virologist who is into virus research, even at an entry level, maybe with 2 or 3 years of experience, is a critical resource, because what he can do for the organization and for the world is way beyond what people can think of, right? So all this is something that HRs have to play a role on, right? So if you look at HR roles, it's just not ending, because we are talking about, and it has to completely reinvent itself to be able to cater to the business that we are talking about. Compensation strategies have to change, incentive strategies have to change, leave policy has to change, cost reduction in terms of cost, HR cost have to be taken care of. So for anybody to have this feeling that HRs, if a lot of times people, when I'm interacting with them, they say that, okay, organizations are suffering losses, this is happening, that is happening, layoffs would be there, so many people have to be fired, etc. And HR is suffering. I tell them, no, HR is not suffering. Organizations need HR more than any, and I mean, the need is much higher. Yes, I do understand there are certain verticals like recruitment, etc. If organizations are not really upbeat on hiring, and not all organizations, but some organizations which are really not upbeat on hiring, uh, 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 they may not need recruiters, or there may be placement consultancies where recruiters were working, where there might be some job loss, etc. But largely, if you see, organization needs HRs and intelligent HRs and good HRs, and then more than any time else, because this whole infrastructure, the whole support system that was created all this while has been disrupted and has changed, right? So absolutely, HRs are needed. Absolutely, there is criticality of the recognize that and appreciate that, right? And I think to a greater extent, from a strategy perspective, they have played a good role for majority of organizations. But even from an implementation perspective, where freshers and where people who are starting a career comes into picture, they need helping hands. Strategy cannot be real unless you have foot soldiers who can really go and drive things which needs to be driven, right? So, this whole consideration in terms of how organizations are, I mean, I do understand, yes, or there is suffering in organization, but for example, if I have to show you data, we have to understand that you need a very, very active and efficient support function like human resource to drive business growth during pandemic. And if you want competitive edge, if you need that, then this is certainly very, very critical and very, very important for businesses, right? In fact, if you look at whether organizations are hiring or not, absolutely companies are hiring. I will probably show you one of the lists that I have of companies that are hiring. Give me a second. I would be able to help you with it. Give me a second. Yeah, just a moment. So when we talk about, yeah, so this is companies which are hiring during pandemic. These are a lot of companies that you can go about seeing, and there are a lot of aspects that you can go about seeing in terms of what they are doing. And this there are it's not that companies are not hiring. There are companies which have cut shop as well. So I'm not saying that picture is that rosy, but at the same time, picture is not that bad either. We have to understand that, right? That there are opportunities, and it is about how we position ourselves in this market. And if this makes sense to you that HRs are needed more than any time before, it is important that we are able to position our profile, our offerings, what we have to offer to an organization in a wonderful manner so that they show interest in us, right? So yes, earlier also, so for example, if earlier companies were hiring 100, they may be hiring 50. Or if companies, if there were 50 vacancies for HR, there might be 30 vacancies for HR. But it's not that the situation is so grim that you can see this list just doesn't end. We're talking about companies in thousands which are hiring, and I'm sure there are many more which are not, because some industries are really doing good. For example, take my industry, education industry, to a great extent in terms of professional training, etc., is doing pretty good, right? We are able to cater to businesses from across the globe. We are able to get registrations from everywhere else. And this, I understand that schools might be facing some difficulty, or colleges, but when you talk about training companies which are not necessarily schools and colleges, they are doing pretty good, and they are looking at having more people on board so that they can get this competitive advantage. So how do we then plan our career in a way where we are able to take this make this as an opportunity for us, isn't it? So let me move ahead with the presentation. I just wanted to probably show it to you in terms of what's happening, and a more positive view to what's happening in the world today, right? And because you are freshers, you are out of college, it's important that we do not blame the situation. We do not blame what's going wrong everywhere, but we plan in the right manner so that we are able to take better decisions in terms of making right career decisions, right? So there are a lot of career options in human resource. And when we talk about companies hiring, they're hiring for people at various designation, right? You have talent acquisition, and you have learning and development, and you have employee relations, and you have compensation, benefit, payroll, and you have HR shared services or HR operations, and then you have HR administration. You are seeing career options in all of it. Currently, there is HR analytics, which is coming up. So you are seeing career options in HR analytics as well. We are talking about different designations on which people are being hired, right from executive talent acquisition to HR trainee to HR executive to HR journalist to payroll executive to CNB associate to HR officer to training coordinator to executive L&D to HR administrator. These are all designations where freshers are starting, and 0 to 2 years experience people are largely getting inputs. We are talking about HR assistant, HR analyst. we are talking about specialist talent development, we are talking about executive background verification, IT recruiter, MIS executive, specialist employee relation, HR operation executive, associate HR services, assistant HR VP. These are all designations where companies are hiring. But yes, they have gotten more choosy. They have gone about working around budgets to hire. They know that the situation is tense, so they are also taking intelligent decisions in terms of what suits the organization. There is no doubt about that. But yes, these openings are there, right? And when we are talking about last 6 months assessment of salaries at entry level, when we say 0 to 2, 0 to 3 years experience in HR, we are talking about salaries range between 2.4 to 6 lakhs in INR, and about these are all per annum salaries, and we are talking about USD 3,500 to USD 9,000 globally, largely Asia Pacific, Middle East, and AU regions is something that we are talking about, right? So we have to be more positive about what's going to happen. We have to see the opportunity, and not only see the opportunity. It's just that when organizations get more choosy, our planning has to be better. So when we talk about planning our career in HR and starting our career in HR, we have to understand few things, that these are the designations what we are talking about. There is a HR hierarchy that we are talking about, where you get into as HR trainee, or you get into as HR executive, and then there is senior executive HR, and then there is assistant manager, and then there is manager, and then there is senior manager, and then there is head of departments, or your head learning and development, or head talent acquisition, and then you have VP HRs, and then you have director HRs, and you have CHROs, which is Chief Human Resource Officer. So this is the hierarchy. We are worried more in terms of starting of a career in HR, where we are talking about HR executives and HR assistants and HR trainees, and these are the designations there we have to get in. And how do we get in then, right? So I think there are two aspects to starting career in human resource management. One is that we need to visualize how a recruiter will see your profile to give you an opportunity to appear for an interview, because that is where it would start, isn't it, right? How would hiring happen? Hiring would happen when you would apply for a job. And when you apply for a job, your profile will go to a recruiter. The recruiter would see the profile. And remember, the objective of a good resume is to get you an interview call. It is not to get you a job. A lot of times people get this whole idea that, oh, make a wonderful resume, you will get a job. No, you will get a job, but the objective of resume is not to get you a job. Objective of a good resume, a good profile, is to get you an interview call, which is a very, very important landmark in your entire job search, right? So how would your profile look is very, very important, right? And the way your profile will look, is it talking about human resource or not, is a very important criteria. If your profile is not talking about human resource, why would anybody give you an interview call? I mean, earlier, even if somebody was giving you an interview call thinking that, okay, let the person come in, we will train him, etc., organizations are absolutely not looking at increasing the burden of training anybody right now, right? So you need to have HR in your profile. If HR is missing in your profile, you cannot expect to start a career in human resource. We have to understand that. And there are two ways HR can reflect on your profile. One is graduation and post-graduation, and the other one is certification programs, right? Now, when we talk about graduation and post-graduation, now graduation courses are largely BBA, BBM, with a specialization in HR, which is towards the final year, the third year. But organizations really do not consider that as a specialization, because that's a graduation. So most of the time, post-graduation, which is largely MBA that we are talking about, and with a specialization in HR. So if you have an MBA in human resource management, you have something on your profile to show, right? But then we have to understand how many MBAs in the market. And second thing is that the whole concept of MBA in India and Asia Pacific and AU is largely borrowed from the MBA concept of West. which is US, UK, Canada, Australia, etc. Right? Now, what's the worry here is that all these regions that I'm talking about in terms of AU and India and South SAARC and Southeast Asia and Middle East, when you borrow this concept of an MBA from West, you there's a lot of academic inflation in these countries that I'm talking about. So what happens is after graduation, what is the next thing that you do? After graduation, the next thing that you do is that you go for an MBA. So if you look at a scenario in all these regions that I'm talking about, you will see that 80 to 90% of people who are doing MBA are freshers, which means are just graduates without any experience. However, the concept of MBA in West is very, very different, right? So in West, if you look at people from West who are doing MBA, are largely people who finish their graduation, they have work experience, so they have gone about working for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 12 years, in fact, and they have very good understanding of the application of business, of how it gets applied. They have been into execution role, and now they want to move to administration role, a manager role, right? From execution to administration, so they go about doing an MBA, right? Now you are now think of it, how the curriculum has been built. The curriculum has been built for people who are, which is considered that they have execution understanding, to build their concept on administration and managing, so that they are able to move into that, and it makes perfect sense. But the same books are being taught in all these countries across the globe, which have borrowed this Western concept of MBA. But who is doing it? Freshers are doing it. And when freshers go out in the market, then organizations don't trust them because they need experience, right? So now here is this guy who has invested X amount of rupees and X amount of money and dollar in terms of, and 2 years of two precious years of life in terms of doing an MBA. But when the person is out in the market, there are few takers, because or if there are takers, then there are takers from top colleges, which is fine. But if there are takers, they are still giving you execution role and not manager role, right? Which means you are starting from what otherwise also you could have started after doing a graduation, right? So concept of MBA is strange, I would say, right? And especially it doesn't make sense for freshers to learn these aspects, which otherwise is better learned, or makes more sense if you have execution experience, right? And a lot of people don't understand this, right? I mean, I have had interactions and discussions. A lot of times I see parents wanting people to do MBA, right? And not only doing it MBA from India. I mean, you go and do MBA from abroad, whether it's US or UK or anywhere else. But we have to understand that unless you do not have experience, this knowledge is just knowledge. It can help you score good marks in university and probably stand in top 10 and take this wonderful degree wearing this great gown. But then from a business perspective, there is nothing much to take away, right? For example, in graduation and post-graduation courses, one of very, very popular books that they teach is OB. I think one of my favorite books. In fact, in university when I studied, I think I scored highest in university, and still remember XY theory and then Maslow's hierarchy and all that. Anyone who is probably who would have gone through, they would know this, right? Stephen P. Robbins, right? Famous writer, or OB, right? Written in 1983. We are talking about, I mean, half of you would have not even been born. I mean, not think about it, right? So we are talking about post this mobile scheme in generational change. We are talking about millennials and Gen Z and Gen X and Gen Y existing in an organization, and baby boomers existing in an organization. And we are learning OB on a book which doesn't even know millennials were there, right? On 1983. Yes, there have been additions there, but additions are additions, right? It doesn't change the construct of the book, right? So can it really prepare somebody for handling human resource in an organization? No, it can't, right? Not even from a strategy perspective, right? So there is huge lacuna in the academic way of creating professionals, right? And we have to understand this, that this in times of pandemic would not really would not really make a person interested, because what an organization will be interested in, that if I am hiring this person, what he or she would be able to do as an HR in my organization. Because just in education, if you write MBA in human resource management with 7.34 or 8.34 GPA, what all can you do as an HR in an organization is the key, right? Are they looking at you to do SWOT analysis or pest analysis? No, they are not looking at you to do SWOT and pest analysis. They are looking at somebody who can execute things, which means create payroll, somebody who can work on job sites, somebody who can update attendance on a HRIS software, somebody who can calculate absenteeism rate and attrition rate, somebody who can effectively coordinate interviews, somebody who can update job descriptions, right? So all this is missing, right? So how do we then start a career in pandemic, which is very, very important. And this is very important key element in terms of understanding this, right? Of what you know, what is your knowledge level, what is your competency level, because understand what is happening here, right? That as a fresher, if pre-pandemic you applied for 100 jobs, you may get 20 interviews, right? Or let's say 10 interviews. So out of 100 roles that you applied for, you got 10 interviews. In that 10 interviews, you got 2 or 3 offers, right? Now the situation is that, first of all, jobs are 50, right? Applicants are higher. So for every 50 interviews, you may get 2 or 3 interviews, right? And in the 2 or 3 interviews, or you may not get an interview depending on what your profile says, right? But in the 2 or 3 interviews, now you have very limited scope of making an error. And you have to then stand out, and you have to prove the knowledge and the competencies that you have and that you are working on, right? Yeah. So we have to understand that this whole element is key to your career growth and your career plan in human resource management. And if you ask yourself, do I have knowledge and competencies of starting working as an HR? And if the answer is no, or if the answer is maybe, or if the answer is let me get a job, I will learn on the job, then I think your possibilities of getting hired is less, because organizations will vouch for people who know things in human resource, who can come and do things in human resource, rather than whom they have to go about training. In scenarios like this, right? Where would they conduct the training? Who would train? People are working remote, things are haywire, right? They would absolutely go for people who can hit the ground running. That is the key, right? So how do we then hit the ground running? Because even if you are from an MBA HR background or a BBA HR background, right? HR jobs doesn't need definitions, right? It doesn't need what helped you score well in graduation and post-graduation in terms of state the difference between HRD and HRM, human resource development and human resource management. No, they are not looking at those differences. They are not looking at to illustrate and elaborate or explain briefly. No, they are not looking at all this. Yeah. HR jobs are looking at real questions, and they are asking you real questions of what you bring to the job, right? How I know the house in the HR field, which means, do you know how this is done in HR? Do you know this or not? how to create a payroll, how to do this, how to do that, how to create a L2 training effectiveness report. Right? Do you know that or not? Because they're not bothered about all those differences between HRD and HRM. No, absolutely not. So what are these hows? Very important for us to know, isn't it? If we are looking at starting a career in HR, right? So look at verticals and look at the hows in each vertical. For example, when we talk about talent acquisition, how requirements are optimized, how budgeting in recruitment is done, how vendor empanelment is done, which means you should be able to see a vendor agreement and you should be able to point where not to make a mistake, and you should know how what are the nitty-gritties of that agreement, how job sites work. You should know. I'm sure if people are applying in Monster, Naukri, the different job sites, you should see the HR perspective of it, isn't it? You are seeing the candidate perspective of it. But HRs are looking for candidates in that job site, but they are using different search modules and different ways of searching, right? How exactly that works? How selection processes are created, how they are designed and implemented. For example, if earlier group discussion was happening, right? Uh, how was that happening, right? So if let's say I am judging a group discussion, I may choose person A and you may choose person B and somebody else may choose person C, because I may feel that communication and teamwork of person A is better. You may feel it's B is better, C is better, right? But that mistake cannot be made anymore, right? You need to create a process and a system so that whether I interview or you interview or I conduct or you conduct or somebody else conducts, we zero down on the right candidate. So processes have to be created, and that exposure to those processes are important, right? Now, when we talk about learning and development, then you should know how training need analysis is done using RTCA, role task competency analysis, right? You should know how training programs are designed, developed, and implemented. You should know how ROI on training is calculated. You should know the formula of ROI. And ROI today is not only for implementation, post-implementation analysis. It is pre-implementation analysis, which means you should be able to analyze ROI before the training starts to tell the business, should they go ahead with the training or not? Very, very important, right? And then you should be able to create training effectiveness reports. You should be able to create training effectiveness report. In fact, let me show you what a training effectiveness report may look like, right? Give me a second. Yesterday, I was talking about on training effectiveness, right? So a good training effectiveness report may have various elements, right? And when we talk about, just give me a second. There is L1 feedback, and this is how you go with collecting L1 feedback. L1 feedback is collected in a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 4. 1 to 4 is a better scale. You should be able to calculate in a scale of 1 to 4, let's say 3.5 out of 5. You should be able to do it on an Excel and or a software and bring it back to the organization in terms of this has been the feedback for training. You should be able to do a L2 feedback where you are able to create a L2 form and then do participant experience and criteria enhancement and total movement analysis. If you're able to do this, right, you will have to do this end of the day, isn't it? If you're not able to do it, then how will a company trust you, right? So basically, you need to know how to go about doing it. If you know all this, and this is part of your profile, then nobody can stop you from getting a role. You would score over those, even if you have one or two opportunities, reduced from 10 opportunities or 12 opportunities that otherwise you would get, right? Let's say in a job hunt for 6 months, you would have gotten 4 opportunities a month, which is about 20 opportunities or 24 opportunities. Now, let's say even if you're getting just one opportunity, right, reduced by 3/4. Still, you are able to prove your metal. Employee relation, how absenteeism is calculated, how attrition is calculated, how budgets are planned and implemented, how exit interviews are conducted, on what criteria is exit interview, and how the data is managed is something that you need to know. And then you need to know how compensation benefit works, right? In terms of balancing internal, external, individual equities, in terms of point plan, in terms of your country specific calculations. For example, in India, basic HRA, PF, ESI, LTA, gratuity, bonus, PT, ST, all that is something that works. And then how leave, loss of pay gets becomes part of CTC, and how pay slips are created in different formats in the world today. And then if somebody gives you a 6 lakh CTC and tells you to break it down and calculate take home, you should be able to do that, right? You should be able to understand offer letters, appointment letters, bonds, contracts, vendor agreements. You should be able to understand how background verifications are done. You should be able to understand how negotiations work, how employee database is management, how full and final settlement is done. You need to know all this, because if you are an HR professional today, right, and you do not know all this, and you're a fresher today, you do not know this, company will not be interested in you, or the right company will not be interested in you. One of it, right? So if all of us are looking at starting well, all of us are looking at having good careers, and being in the industry for 17 years, I can advise you, I can suggest that as of now, when interacting with HR heads and HR managers and decision makers in different organizations, I can assure you that organizations do not have the patience to train you now. So this perception itself that, okay, let me get a job, I'll learn on the job, right, is not going to work. It's not going to work for freshers anymore, because organizations have choice. Let's be clear on this. Organizations have choice, and every day, every month that gets passed on without your a positive movement towards the way you are working, you are looking at more competition, and you are looking at situations not being more conducive for you in times to come, right? Because the way to go about it is to plan your career well, and planning your career well is largely about what you bring to the organization. Remember this: what you bring to the organization, right? It's not or what would organizations see, or let me get, the organization has to see something in you, and that is something that you bring to the organization. So very, very important things, right? Now, if you know all of this, what I showed you, right? If you know how to create L2 reports and L1 reports, if you know how to work on job sites, if you know how absenteeism rate, attrition rate is calculated, how CTCs are done, if you know all of it, then organization trusts you, organization hires you, and organization pays you. And it does not matter at any level. A lot of times, even experienced HRs, right, would know half of one bit what they have done, but they would not know other things. For example, a person may know how to work on job sites, but a person doesn't know how to create a CTC. In fact, an experienced HR may know how to create a training form, but may not know how to work on job sites, or how to calculate attrition rate and absenteeism rate, right? So if you have something to offer which is wholesome for an organization would trust, hire, and pay you. Very, very important for us to understand, right? So how do we then bring this across, right? How do we build this, inculcate this, get this in our systems, right? So as I said, organization in this pandemic times would not prefer hire and train, right? They would prefer hire, trained professionals, which is very, very important, right? So when we talk about this, I think one thing that you can go about doing is, especially for freshers, CHRMP has a foundation certification. But before I talk about certification, what I have largely talked about so far is your planning in career. So we have to understand what are the key elements that I've talked about. I have talked about some myths that needs to get busted. We have to understand that HR has a very, very critical role to play in pandemic, because the entire support system is seeing a mega shift. And if it's seeing a mega shift, it's mainly being driven by HR professionals. And we have to understand that organizations are hiring. They are hiring less, but they are hiring. So situation is not as worse or as gloomy as you think. So we should stay positive. At the same time, we should plan our career, right? So to plan our career, we need to make sure that we to start a HR career, we get the right elements on our profile so that we are able to approach organizations and they show interest in us, because it's now about survival of fittest. And when I say fittest, I'm not talking about the person who is fit. It's also about fitment, right? So the survival of fitment is also, so with how you are fitting in well is also very, very important. And organizations would look at people. And as I said, the concept of MBA has largely failed, right? So if your college is able to place you, I think that's wonderful. But my understanding is that not 95% of colleges which promise 100% placements do not actually do anything, in spite of the amount of money, time, etc. that is invested, right? So then it's left on you to figure your way out in this jungle out there. And the way to that is to upskill yourself and know what it takes to start your career without wasting time, which is very, very important. Because if your career had started 3 months back, you would have 3 months of experience, and by December you would have 6 months of experience, right? And that would count in your next job. So it's very, very important that you are able to plan that well, right? And then I told you that to be able to be more attractive to as a prospective candidate, you need to know certain things. So we took a lot of hows, and I told you that if you know all of it, then then the company is interested. Otherwise, company is not interested, right? It would any which way prefer a person who can do all those things, irrespective of MBA or with MBA or otherwise as well, right? Because MBA is literally not teaching anything. And if you're not MBA also, if you know these things, then you have edge over an MBA. And if you're an MBA, plus you know all this, then you have edge over other MBAs and other people, right? So how do we then get to know all those things? Now, you can go about knowing on your own as well, right? It would just mean that you may have to spend maybe next 1 year to figure this out, right? But then if the solution that we have is the foundation program, and this foundation program is all that I told you. Whatever I showed you in terms of hows is being answered in here through different modules. So when we talk about job analysis, it teaches you how to write job descriptions, which is very interesting. When we talk about talent acquisition, it tells you about reduction in manpower. It tells you about setting up of designs, selection designs. And I talked about this in terms of group discussion example, but other examples as well that you need to know, which is very, very important. We talked about L&D, where I showed you training effectiveness reports, but you also learn triangulation in blooms and curves, and you learn Kirkpatrick L1, L2, L3, L4, and ADDIE, which is very, very important. And its application, employee engagement, I told you in terms of attrition rate, absenteeism rate, exit interviews, etc. That is something that you need to know. Compensation planning, I told you about creating CTCs and internal, external, individual equity. Whatever you would be doing as part of the organization, as an HR in an organization, is something that is being taught to you. HR operations, offer letter, appointment letter, bonds, contracts, service agreements, background verification, joining formalities, leave management, full and final settlement. All of it is something that is being taught to you, right? And the way it's working is in a wonderful manner. You are getting a login ID, password. There are pre-recorded session assignments, presentations, quizzes, and then every Saturday there is a deep dive session by an expert which teaches you, right? So you learn at your own pace, and then you attend an online class. You learn at your own pace, and then you attend an online class, and then you get your entire learning cycle is complete, because there is enough to reinforce learning, and then expert session to drive it in terms of application. So you learn concepts, and then a trainer comes in and briefs you on those concepts, and then updates you and does an activity and an exercise, so that you have an exposure to how it gets actually implemented in an organization. So if a performance management form has to be created, you know how to go about creating a performance management form. If an interview evaluation form is to be created, you know how to go about creating that. Anything that you need to know is something that is being taught to you, right? You learn through 4K videos, you get validated through CHRMP and PSMU global validation. I told you, just go click LinkedIn, see CHRMP, it's all across. We give you foundation certification, a blockchain verified digital badge that you get, link it to your LinkedIn profile. We teach you how to create a LinkedIn profile as well, and then get 20% more hits. A lot of hirings in HR happen through LinkedIn. So good to have a digital badge like CHRMP on it. You get a certificate of achievement with a unique certification code for the foundation certification is something that you go about learning, right?